Hey, welcome back to the Finding Hope podcast. This is Kayla Bundy. If you have been in search for a sisterhood, a community, a safe space, place to feel encouraged and happy and healing, you are in the right place, friends. And I am so thankful you're here. Welcome to the community. And if you're already a part of it, I love you guys and you are amazing. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about knowing how to identify when you are in an unhealthy relationship. And not just romantically, but this can also apply to family, it can apply to friends, it can apply to mentorship. So many different areas and aspects of your life, you can have unhealthy relationships, and it can be really, really hard to see when they're romantic because you're blinded by the love and the infatuation. But it can also be equally as hard to see when it's not a romantic relationship, because that's where it can get so cloudy and our expectations for a friendship can be very different when there isn't a romantic aspect. And unfortunately, that can lead to a lot of unhealthy, toxic relationships in your life. In this episode, we are going to break down all the different questions to run through and ask yourself with the either relationships you currently have or the relationships you're walking into. These questions are so applicable to every relationship in your life, no matter the context or what that involves. I think these questions are so helpful to identify what is unhealthy, what is healthy, and not just so we can be like, oh, great, I have these healthy relationships or I don't have these healthy relationships, but so that we can work to get the healthiest relationships. Because friends, I have been in this season of my life where I've been so blessed with my friendships. Like, I am constantly thanking the Lord for providing the people, for having these amazing friends in my life. And it wasn't until this last year where I have really been in awe of the way God has blessed my friendships, and not just my friendships, but my relationships with my family, my friends, the people I look up to, all of it. It has been so crazy how much healthier all of these relationships have gotten in my life. And I never even thought that they were unhealthy. Some of them, it's not like they were unhealthy, but they weren't operating in the healthiest, safest way possible. And now that I've been living in this season of my life for a while, where almost every single person that I interact with is such a healthy relationship, and I've learned how to have boundaries in different relationships in my life based on what that looks like for me and them as individuals and together, and learning how to navigate this and cultivate these environments is so beyond transformative in my life. And it has made all of the hard things I've walked through, these massive bumps that used to be in my life, they feel like pebbles now. And these huge waves that used to just knock me off my track and my path, now it's like a little splash in the water. And it is because my community has been so grounding for me, and I have such healthy, safe spaces to talk, to process, to communicate. And I'm that for them as well. And I'm not running dry and I'm not empty. And there is this, I feel, new energy and a new well that I'm drawing from, where I'm able to pour out, and it fills me up as I'm pouring out. And that is where I want you to be and how you to feel. And that is why we are going to dive into how to identify unhealthy relationships. So today I'm basically just going to run through a list of questions to ask yourself. I would really encourage you to be very honest in the ways you answer these. Because when you are living in such healthy relationships, like all the ways that I would answer these questions I'm about to ask you I would be overjoyed to answer them with such honesty. I would be very proud of the way I'm able to answer these questions because of how incredible these people are. And I know previously, if I were to go through this list and answer these questions when I have been in unhealthy relationships and I wanted them to be healthy relationships, I definitely would be kind of tweaking these answers or like having these conversations back and forth of my head of like, is it this? Is it not? Is it this? And like, should I feel this way? Is this okay? Is this not okay? And when there's all of this questioning going on inside your head and there isn't clarity, that's something just to take note of and to be aware of. So the first question is, are my emotions accepted and encouraged? And I want to state before I run through the rest of these, all of these questions to ask yourself about them, also ask yourself about you. Because you can't have a healthy relationship where they are everything for you and you're none of that for them. Having the healthy boundaries, having the awareness to know what you need to give to that relationship and what to expect from that relationship. Because obviously in a work environment, it's different. In a mother-daughter environment, it's different. In a boyfriend-girlfriend, it's different. So ask yourself these questions as well. Do I feel bad for being vulnerable and honest? This is a huge one. If you feel bad, friends, about your emotions, whether you're valid in them or not, I could be so invalid in the way I'm thinking and feeling. And I can go to one of my friends and say all these things and be like, am I crazy? And they can say, yeah, Kayla, that was like, I feel like you're kind of being a little bit psycho about it. But that's a safe space for me to communicate and to be vulnerable and to be honest. And that doesn't mean that they have to be like, yes, you're right, you're valid. But they're just a safe space to have that conversation and to know that, yeah, I can go there and be kind of ashamed of the way I'm feeling and be really honest, and they're never going to make me feel bad about it. They might call me out and say, yeah, you probably, that's not really a healthy way to look at that. Or have you thought about it this way? They can totally say that, but just them even being a safe space and not making me feel bad about the way I'm thinking and feeling and vice versa is such a gift. Next question, are they a safe space to communicate needs that aren't being met or have conflict? This is really important because it can be really awkward to communicate what you, I don't even want to say the word need, but what you would ideally like out of that relationship. Even with one of my friends, like we recently had this conversation and really all I needed to know and all she needed to know was, hey, like we're allies and I'm going to be on your side no matter what. I'm going to be there for you. I am there for you. And whatever past traumas you've had, I just want to put that all and stop all of that, block all of that, and just let you know, I'm an ally. We're in this together. And that could have been all she needed. That could have been all I needed to hear. But being able to communicate, hey, going to your friend and I'm feeling a little insecure in this. I've had these things happen to me in the past, and I know that's not new you. I know that's not your heart, but I just need confirmation. And knowing that that's a safe space to ask for that and to be able to communicate that need and for them to just be able to hear you and reassure you in that is such a different way of approaching friendship and the insecurity or traumas that you may have had in past scenarios or with people in your past. And if coming to them and saying that if they respond in a way that's oh, I can't even believe you would think that I wouldn't be there for you. Do you not know me at all? Of course I would be there. That response is a very manipulative response because it is making you feel bad for you having past trauma and you're not putting that on them, and they're trying to make it seem like you're attacking them and putting all of this on them, when in reality, you're just asking for assurance. And when people respond like, I can't believe you wouldn't trust me, or like, da 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 da, like that response is a very egotistical response. And I don't view that as a safe place to talk and have communication in uncomfortable topics when there's a defense mechanism that's perceived in like oh, I can't believe you wouldn't trust me. I can't believe you would think that of me. Like all of that type of stuff. That's a really manipulative way of making this situation about them and how hurt and affected they are in it, and taking your problem and now making it their problem. And so those are just like different things to look out for. And I've been guilty of that in the past without even knowing it. And this is something I'm really learning. Like, I mean, it's been years since I think I've done that, but I was recently aware, and it was brought to my attention, that's actually a really toxic way to communicate. Anytime you address an issue, a need, a conflict, and if the response is in I can't believe you would think that of me sort of a way, that's actually really toxic. And this kind of leads to the next question, but ask yourself, when I come to them with a concern or a hurt, does the conversation end with it being my fault or what I need to work on? Because this is a big one for me that I felt like in so many of my past relationships, it would take a lot for me to talk about how I was actually feeling, and communication was not my strong suit. I was great at listening, but when it came to communicating my actual thoughts and feelings and emotions and being vulnerable, I've come a long way, to say the least. And I know when I would have these conversations, because they were very rare for me and they were really hard for me, I didn't notice the way that they were handled wasn't a very respectful way. And I would always leave these conversations feeling so misunderstood and feeling very confused, because when I'd communicate the things I was hurt about, all of a sudden it would be my problem to fix. And it was like my issue and my fault. And so just noticing those things, it can be really easy when you love someone and you care so deeply about someone, and when you express a hurt or concern and then they somehow put it back on you, it's so easy to take that and to hear that and be like, yeah, like you're right, I do need to work on this, or like, you're right, I didn't mean to hurt you, I didn't even notice that was hurting you as well. And it can be so easy to just take on all of this extra stuff when you love someone and you care about someone. But I really want to challenge you to remove yourself from this situation and just see it logically without the emotions. But logically, if you ever enter a conversation with a hurt, a concern, an issue, and it ends up being your thing and your fault, when it's like a healthy issue. Obviously, if you're super controlling and you're like, I just need to be able to control you more, like I feel so hurt that you won't let me have the say in this. Like, obviously that's a little different. But if logically you enter into something with your hurts and your concerns and you're really being vulnerable in those moments, and you leave that conversation with all of it being your thing to fix, then I would just say like that's a very big red flag for me. It should always be a place where when a friend comes to me and they have these concerns and they're hurt about something, I want to be so diligent about not being on the defense, not justifying whatever I'm thinking, saying, or doing, but being so present and just listening to them and hearing them out. I want to be able to have time to fully understand where you're coming from and like take myself out of my own shoes and like put myself in yours. Because if this is an issue that you're bringing to me, like it clearly is weighing on your heart, and I want to be able to give it my attention without my ego or pride. Next question. It's so simple, but it can be so challenging. It's, do I feel like the best version of myself? And do I make them the best version of themselves? And this has also been one that's been like a very prevalent thing in my life where I really have to look back and ask myself and be honest, because this is one that it's so hard for me to be honest in. I can really talk myself into, yeah, I'm the best version because I'm doing this, and that. And reality is I know I'm not. Reality is I know I'm not proud of the person I am all the time when I'm around them, or I know I'm not proud of the person I'm becoming because of the way they have affected my life. So just be honest with yourself in that. And that kind of is like a similar question that leads me to, am I proud of the person I'm becoming? That's a really, really big one, because if you're not proud of the person you're becoming, you're not going to be proud of the person you currently are or the person that you're going to be. And then this also leads into it. After you've asked yourself if you're the best version, if you're proud of who you're becoming, ask yourself, if I were to become more like them, would I be proud of that version of me? So if I were to take on all who they are, would I be proud of myself? And that is a really like, there's really no faking that answer, because that's where it's easy to like love someone and look past a lot of unhealthy, toxic things when you're looking at them and they're apart from you and you see them as an individual and all of their good qualities. But having to think like, if I were to take all that on, and if that was a whole part of me, and if that's how I was, and that's how I operated, and that's how I acted, and that's how I thought, would I be proud of myself? And if you wouldn't, if you're more proud of who you are and you want to be less like them, that's a big, big thing to recognize. That is nothing to brush on over. Because who you're around, you are going to become. And if that's a teacher, if that's a friend, if that's a boyfriend, if that's your mom, if that's your dad, if that's your sister, if they are not what you want to be more like, you do not need to keep giving your time and energy to that. It does not matter the role that they have in your life. You are able to make these conscious decisions for yourself. And I'm not saying to fully remove yourself in any way, shape, or form, but if you know every time I'm on the phone with my mom, I'm feeling all these things and it's a really unhealthy relationship, that doesn't mean remove your mom. That just means learn how to have different boundaries and recognize these things so that every conversation you do have with her, you are able to not be affected, and it's not changing or shaping who you are or taking away from who you are, but you're able to enter in a relationship with these people that might not be the healthiest in the healthiest way possible. Next question to ask yourself is, am I torn down when there is an issue? So that essentially means, say a problem comes up, whether the guy you're dating overheard that you used to do this, XYZ, and he's like upset and disappointed, or a girlfriend heard that you didn't invite her to this event, and on and on. I would want to hear their perspective without coming to them and being like, I thought you were a better friend than that. I can't believe you did that. That just breaks my heart that you used to be that way or that you said those things. And I just thought so much more of you. Like, that's like not necessarily a great way to approach a situation where there's already conflict in it. If you're pushing somebody down that's already down, that's not really going to create a whole lot of resolution, and that's not a very like comfy space for either of you to be in. And so definitely don't push the people down when there's conflict, and you should definitely notice, like, am I being torn down when there's issues? And I've been that before too. Like, I've been the person that's torn down where, you know, somebody hears that I used to do XYZ, and then when they talk to me about it, they make me feel so much shame and guilt, and I like feel so embarrassed for that version of myself that I was. And those are things that like I shouldn't feel from somebody that loves me as a friend, as a parent, as a sister, as a boyfriend. Like I already feel those emotions enough on my own, and I don't need to be like, I don't need those emotions forced and pushed on me as well. Next question is, do I feel a pressure from them or myself to take on their issues or fix their problems? Now, this could be a you thing. This could be a them thing. So there's, you really have to think on this question of, I can get in the habit of, it's easy for me to just take on other people's problems. And so I'm like, oh, I'll just take it on. Oh, I'll just take it on. And then they start putting a bunch of problems on me. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so drained. And that's a me thing. Like, I know that's a me thing. And so just being aware of those things, or if they're constantly like coming to you and they have all these issues and they expect you to be the one solving them, and that's not your role in their life, and that shouldn't, and realistically that never should be your role in your life. Like, your issues are your issues, their issues are their issues. If there's like this big pressure to be the one to solve things in that person's life, that is too much pressure for any human being, and you're always going to fall short. And that's not a healthy way to operate in relationships, by putting your things and your stuff on anybody else. Next question is, do you feel unsure of what version you will get or the way they will respond? This is huge, 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 huge for me. And Olivia Rodrigo, I love her song lyric. She says in her song, she says, which lover will I get today? Will you walk me to the door or send me home crying? And I love this whole song in general, but I relate so much to that lyric because it's so true. Like, which version will I get of you today? Like, are you going to be the one making me cry? Are you going to be the one making me smile? Like, are you going to be the one walking me home? Are you going to be the one that's tearing me down? And when you don't know, and there isn't this stability of like, I know every time I see you, I'm going to be feeling these ways, or I can expect these things, that's a good, stable relationship when there's consistency. When there's all these ups and downs of emotions and the way they respond is so unpredictable, that is very scary, and that's not a place where you really want to grow deep roots within that relationship. Because you should, like, I always want to be the same version of myself. Like, I can have my highs, I can have my lows, I can obviously experience emotions, but I want my friends to know me through and through and know what to expect whenever they see me, they talk to me, they have these things going on. I want to be a very consistent person in the way I act, I think, I process all of it. Like, I want to be a very consistent person, because with consistency, there's a lot of stability. And in my friendships that are so healthy and that just bring me so much life, like, it's not like we don't walk through hard things, or it's not like one of us isn't going through stuff at different points, but I know, like, I know what to expect. Like, I know if they're really upset, I know they're not going to yell at me. Like, that's not even a thought in my head. Or I know if they're really upset, like, they're not going to lash out in these crazy ways. I know, like, oh, if they're upset, like, I can expect these things. It's not a guessing game. I feel like if you feel like you're in a guessing game with this person, then that is definitely something to maybe create a little bit more space and distance, because you should not be a guessing game for anyone, and no one should be a guessing game for you either. There definitely has to be a sense of security in the way you are going to react at any given moment based on any circumstance that you might be going through. And that's basically the same thing as my next question, but is the environment predictable or unpredictable? Then this one is for the people in the romantic relationships out there. I had a therapist ask me this, and it really brought things into perspective for me, because I've always been the person that I'm like, I'm dating for marriage, and like, I only want to like invest in this if I like see you be my husband, I would want to marry you, on and on and on. And I've always been that way. And then I had somebody ask me, like, would you marry them in the current place they are? If they never changed, and the current place they are, if you had to get married to them tomorrow, would you marry them? And that question, for some reason, was like, whoa. Like, it really made me think, because I'm always like, oh, potential, potential, potential. And I've always thought like, yeah, of course I want to date for marriage. And like, I'm only dating you because I could see myself marrying you. But that's always like, oh, in the future, in the future. But reality is like, would you marry them right now? Right here and now, would you marry them? Who they are, what they are, everything they are, would you marry them right now? And that's a really scary question, because obviously, like, relationships take time. But I do feel like that's a very important question to ask if you are in a relationship that is serious. Because if you wouldn't be able to say yes confidently, if that became your reality tomorrow and you were not confident in that decision, then I think there's a lot more going on in that relationship that you need to look at and recognize. The next question is, are guilt and shame common emotions? This is a massive one. I'm such a firm believer that like condemnation comes from the devil and conviction comes from the Lord. And essentially what that means is like condemnation is when you're basically like, you did this wrong, you should feel bad, you're a horrible person, whatever, okay? That's an extreme, but that's very condemning. And that leads to a lot of guilt and shame as the emotions that are felt. Versus conviction, I think definitely comes from the Lord, and conviction is like the healthy way to go about things. I want you to know that you don't have to defend yourself or explain yourself to me because I know your heart. And that's a totally different way, but still being able to say like, hey, I don't agree with that because I know you're better than that. Versus like, I don't agree with that and you're doing it so wrong and you should feel horrible for that. I can't believe you would ever even think to do that. Like, that's a terrible way to approach things. Like, you don't want people to feel condemned. And then the next question, this can be very hard to admit to yourself, but are the qualities that you love about yourself being praised, or do you feel the need to suppress them? Because the qualities that you love about yourself, you should never feel like you have to suppress. And if you feel bad or guilty or like you need to tone those qualities down, then there's an aspect of that relationship that already makes you feel like you can't be your honest self, you can't be vulnerable, you have to sort of hide different parts of who you are. And those are never things that you should feel in a close friendship, relationship, any sort of thing where you are deeply connected with somebody. And the next question is, are you waiting or hoping for them to change, or are you hanging on to previous growth that they've made? This one for me, friends, this is where it's like, it's so beyond hard for me, because I am such a person that I'm like, I know I have not been a great version of myself in so many aspects of my life, in so many seasons of my life, throughout my life. Like, there's been so many things that I feel like I've done, I've said, I've thought, and I'm like, I am not proud of that. Thank goodness I've grown from that, on and on and on. Like, I'm so glad that's not the person I am anymore. And then when people come into my life that have those same things that they're doing that I used to do, it's so easy for me to be like, I need to extend so much grace because I once was there. I get it. Like, I was so naive. I didn't know either. Like, I'm just going to be with them and empower with them through it and like forgive every single thing they do. I'm so quick to have that reaction. And not that that's a bad reaction. That is a very good thing if you have that in you. But where it's unhealthy is when that's all you're holding on to. And I also like always remind myself, like, Kayla, like, while you were doing all you were doing, did you ever expect people to give you a pass for everything because you didn't know it at the time? And no, and I never did. And that's where I'm at currently. Like, of course I still have so much to learn. I have so much to improve on. And do I ever expect my friends, my mentors, my family to give me a pass just because I'm still figuring it out all the time, to constantly excuse my actions? No, like, not at all. Like, I know I'm growing, I know I'm learning, and I never would want the people I love to be affected and hurt by the way I'm living, and just be patiently hoping and waiting for me to eventually get there. Like, I never would want that from my friends. And so that's like a very good identification of like, okay, if I wouldn't ask that or expect that from anyone I love, I also don't need to expect that and put all of that on me for the people I love. And I know I've talked about this in other podcasts, but like, I think there's such a difference of taking on people's problems versus loving them through what they're walking through and being there to encourage and call them higher. And that is the place that I want to operate from. I want to operate out of a space where I'm there to encourage, I'm there to call them higher, I'm there to walk through it with them, but I am not taking on their problems and I am not carrying the weight with them. I can totally be there alongside, but I'm not carrying that as well. Okay, and then the last one that I think is super important that I want you to notice is ask yourself, are they playing games instead of being honest? And I've had this in romantic relationships, I've had this in friendships, I've had this with my family, I've had this with so many people, and this is where I spiral in my mind when people play games with me. When I ask them something, when I give the space for there to be real communication, for issues to be addressed, and when they either deny it or they just don't respond, or they do these like mind games to make me figure out what's going on or make me feel bad that like you should know you should know why I'm mad at you. You should know why there's an issue. Or I'll even come to people and be like, hey, is it okay if I do this? Like basically asking their permission. And they just will completely ignore it. And then I know that they're going to think and judge all of my actions based on if I do it or I don't. And those are such mind games. And if you are being the person to give the space, to ask to talk, to have clear communication and be honest and ask people's boundaries, ask what they're okay with, ask what they're not okay with, ask what they're upset, ask what you did. And if they are not able to be honest with you and they're playing these games with you where they just go silent for days or they won't talk to you until like you figure out what you've done wrong, that is so abusive in power, in my opinion. I think that is such an abusive thing to do that just makes them feel like they are in control of you. And that is so unhealthy. That is something I will never tolerate. I've been there, done that, and my mind goes in absolute mental torment. And it is the worst thing. And I've also had the same things where like it can be similar scenarios. And I was actually just talking to one of my best friends the other day, and we had this whole conversation. We like had so many breakthroughs in this conversation, and both of us, we were like, I want you to know, like, if there's ever anything that like I'm hurt by, I'm upset by, like I will be so honest with you, like I will come to you. And both of us were so relieved because we've both had people where it's like, I don't know that there's an issue. I don't know that they're upset. I don't know what I've done wrong. I don't know exactly why they're mad. And they're like, and there's these things going on that I just wasn't even aware of. And that's so scary. And both of us, we were like just so relieved to be like, yeah, like we've both been really hurt by our friends or our family or our boyfriends not being honest with us. And it's so scary to live in an environment where honesty isn't present at all times. What I'm learning in my life is it's actually way better to know like, yeah, I want to know that you're going to come to me every time you're hurt. And I want you to know I'm going to come to you every time I'm hurt. And not that like, not in an attacking way, but in a way that's like, no, you have that peace of mind knowing like, you don't ever have to question if you've upset me. You never have to question if you saying that was hurtful to me, if you hanging out with that person made me mad. Like, you never have to question those things because I'll just tell you. I'll be so honest and tell you. And like, for both of us to be able to give each other that reassurance, it was like, wow, I have such a weight off, because I know, like, if I do anything that could be hurtful, I will know, and I'll be able to talk it out with her, and I will be able to have that space and that communication, and I will have that clarity and that peace of mind knowing, oh, okay, I won't do that again, and like I can reassure you in that, versus me living each day, or like living in these relationships where I'm just living my life and I have no idea that what I'm doing is hurtful, and there's all these issues that are being built up, and then I'm like constantly questioning everything I do, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells because like I don't want to make them mad, or I don't want to upset them, or is like when I said that, did the tone I say it in make them upset, or like did this like word choice, like was that hurtful, and like where I can start overthinking everything. And so I think that's like a very, very big question to ask yourself if they play games instead of being honest. And so now that we've gotten through all of these questions, I know that was a lot, and that's the point, because it's easy to ask yourself a handful of questions and convince yourself in some way, shape, or form that you're in healthy relationships when you're not. And so I hope that this either showed you that you have great healthy relationships, and you were able to identify the relationships in your life that are so healthy, that are so fruitful, and then you are also able to identify the relationships that aren't operating in as fruitful of a way, and that aren't as life-giving, and that might have elements of toxicity in them. And so where to go from here is, I want you in those relationships that you've noticed, okay, these might not be the healthiest relationships, and maybe they're not toxic, maybe they're just not in a healthy place, maybe I just don't feel these things, and they don't feel these things from me in the ways that they should be felt. The first thing is to create boundaries to protect yourself and not to punish them. That's a big thing. Whenever you create boundaries, they should be out of love, never out of punishment or to make them feel a certain way. And this can be a very convicting, because there's times I'm like, oh, I just don't want to talk to them because I'm hurt. And it's like, okay, well, am I not talking to them because like lovingly I'm not going to be my best self for them, and like I want to walk into it being able to hear them and appreciate them and see it from their point of view, and that's why I'm going to take some space for myself? Or am I taking space for myself because I'm hurt in a way where I want them to feel bad for hurting me, and I want them to know that like I'm not going to stick around and put up with that sort of behavior? That is a boundary that is to punish them instead of to protect yourself and your relationship. So make sure you're creating boundaries in a way to protect yourself and never to punish. Next one, communicate, communicate, communicate. Can't say it enough, just communicate. Third one is be open and honest with your friends and family. Like, go to wise counsel about it and try to talk honestly and see things honestly and be very open and receptive to the words or advice that are spoken to you. Next is to spend time away from them and to be with the people that you feel very safe and in healthy relationships with. If you're questioning if you're in an unhealthy relationship, one of the best things you can do is just get distance. Just having that space to not have them in your head, like not be worried about checking in with them on the phone or talking to them or seeing them, and getting space and distance and being with the people that you feel so loved and safe and secure with is so transformative, and it'll really give you clarity if it is a healthy relationship or it isn't. Next is just don't rush to make a decision. Just feel it out and take the time, take the space you need. There's no rush to make any drastic decisions within these relationships that you might have. The last thing is don't dwell on the past, whether it's good or bad moments or memories. Just live in the present. You are moving forward. There's no reason to dwell on all the things that have previously happened and to let that keep seeping into your future and the choices that you're making for your future. So I hope this was really helpful. I hope you guys were able to discern for yourself where you're at in your relationships. And I love you guys, and I will talk to you next week.